Hey everyone, thank you for joining us for episode 2 of Blind Banter. We are talking tonight about employment. Again, my name is Lorne Neufeld. I'm calling in from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, and I'm here with my co-host Carlos.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I'm Carlos Garcia. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin again. United States, I guess. And like Lauren said, we're really excited to talk tonight about employment, the different opportunities, and especially what resources you can take advantage of today, given the fact that there's a pandemic and employment prospects are probably a little bit more dim. Really excited to share that with you guys. And I think we should just begin, right, Lauren?
Yes, let's do it. We'll let Carlos take it from here.
Yep. So I'm going to give a little bit more of a student-centric perspective, but I think that a lot of what I'm saying here is going to apply to anyone, regardless of where you're looking for a job, what type of job you're looking for, because a lot of these skills are timeless and universal. So let's just start with taking advantage of resources, okay? And what I mean by that is you often will see, if you're in college, you might get notifications or emails from career services or whatever it's called at your school saying like, hey, we're having an interview workshop or resume building skills workshop or whatever. Or even if you're not in school anymore, you can, if you're subscribed to things like the Lime Network, which we've mentioned previously, they offer a lot of those types of skill building opportunities for for people with disabilities. And so you could definitely take advantage of that. And I'm sure that there are also other opportunities available through your public library and through other workshops that are put on from time to time in the community. And now I was like a lot of people in this regard that I always thought, I don't need to go to that. What's the big deal about that, right? I already have a good resume. I have good interview skills and there's nothing I can learn. But that's actually not true. Everyone can always learn something new. And that's really what they're trying to teach you here, right? If you are the person who's willing to take the extra hour and a half at most, to go to a workshop like this, then you will be just that much more prepared than the other candidate, right? We've talked about this as blind people. We do definitely face an uphill battle, and you don't want to complicate that battle for yourself by having, subpar interview skills or having a resume that's not properly formatted, right? That really does hurt your chances before you can even get through the door, right? And if you're in the door and they see that you're blind and you you interview poorly, then they're going to be even less inclined to hire you. And so today, especially in this, in these tight employment times, we really want to make sure that we're presenting the best interview skills that we have. Now, as I mentioned, take advantage of those opportunities, but it also comes down that, well, you need to be able to find jobs and you need to be able to find opportunities. One of the sites that I like to use most here in the US is Handshake. And Handshake is a website that you'll probably get access through your institution if you're in college. And there's other ones as well, but I'll just talk about Handshake because I'm the most familiar with it. So you can really get a lot of job opportunities there. I usually like to sort by newest, regardless of what website I'm on. I like to sort by newest because I think that them seeing your application in first, if they're putting it up today and you're submitting your application today, then it's going to give a really good first impression and you're going to be at the top of the pile for them. So definitely that's my first strategy for that. I've also used Indeed and Glassdoor. Although I found them to be a little bit less user-friendly because they make me sign in and then create an account with Workday, I believe it was a different website. So not exactly the most user-friendly, but depending on your area, they might also offer a lot of positions in that in your particular industry that you're looking for. So definitely consider those. But for me, I'd say that the most accessible platforms are the ones that I've mentioned above, and some of the other ones that I won't mention have had some other issues. So you sometimes run into those websites on a Google search. Some of the other ones that I've neglected to mention that are popularly coming on sometimes have given me some accessibility trouble. Lauren, maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the Canadian websites, if there are any that you've used, or are you limiting your search to Glassdoor and Indeed as well?
So I don't use a lot of Glassdoor. I find that Indeed works really well, especially in Canada. The only issue with that is that you're getting hundreds and hundreds of responses, and a lot of the time people aren't willing to either put the actual check mark beside them saying yes, you're moving on to the next one, or else they'll pretty much ghost you. And then a month later it goes, company A, B, and C unfortunately has moved to the next I guess, the next step or hiring process, and unfortunately you have not been selected. So you get a lot of that, and you don't really get a lot of instant feedback right away. I find
Yeah.
LinkedIn works really well for that
Yeah.
because you
I
can
forgot to
really
mention
reach out, and whatever type of company you're with, one of the things that I've always found is that you can always find, especially for the larger corporations, you can find talent scouts, tons and tons of them on LinkedIn. So what you can do is you can apply for the jobs, and then you can reach out to them and try to even add, say, 5 or 6 of them. Like some of the corporations, for example, I've helped someone get a job with Shopify, and they have, you know, at least 30, 40 different talent acquisition scouts on LinkedIn. So you literally just blanket every single one of them, and you find out exactly what department they're in, see if you can get the proper contacts, try to build somewhat of a rapport, and there's a better chance that you're going to be able to get in through one of those side doors
exactly.
to at least get an interview or get your name on the radar, so that you can kind of move on to the next step. Because unfortunately, even if you're not blind, it's still hard enough to try to find a job, especially in a lot of these markets. And
Yeah.
especially when you're in a very tech-centric area like Ottawa. Like Ottawa literally has the tech capital of Canada. So when you have the whole tech sector, there's a lot of people that are vying for all these jobs, and it can get kind of difficult, especially when they open it up for everybody across the world, because a lot of it's remote or a lot of it's call in, and they want to have X amount of people in Europe and X amount of people in different time zones. So you really have to kind of keep yourself to stand out, and being able just to kind of reach out and look at getting people in front of you, or you being able to get yourself in front of those people, that's really beneficial for you. So
Yes.
I find that it's very common. I know Facebook seems to be pretty good too, with like the local job searches and groups, because a lot of talent acquisition scouts will actually go on Facebook and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to fill this position. And then you can go, oh, I'm great, can I send you my resume? Oh yeah, no problems. And then
Yeah.
it's another avenue. One of the main ones too, also, if you have disabilities in Canada wise, is that the government has a lot of programs. So does a lot of community centers, where they'll have different job banks or different agreements with different local companies or corporations, where they're sourcing people with disabilities. And if you're in with like like for example in Ontario, if you have the Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP, or if you're on Ontario Works, which is a form of social assistance, they actually have specific job banks that you can gain access to, and they're partners working with both the unemployment programs and the disability / social assistance programs, to be able to get those people employed. So if that it kind of pertains to you, that's definitely something that you want to talk to, like, your worker or your client specialist to figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Lauren, because we do have similar programs across the states here. I'm personally most familiar with DVR, as it's called, the Department of Vocational Rehabilitation here in Wisconsin. And if you live in another state, I'm sure that you have a similar program. It might not be called DVR, but it'll have something to do with vocational rehabilitation. If you do some Googling, you could probably find it. And they provide a lot of the same services that Lauren was talking about, where they can help you get jobs. They can also help you if you need different materials to get your job done. So I know a friend who actually got a Braille Note Touch through DVR for free, because he needed it to complete some of his tasks at work, and he also got a computer and a couple of other things. So they will definitely
Yeah.
be able to help you with even if you do need a little bit of more advocacy with your job. They can help you with that. They can help you with technology. They can help you with actually acquiring a job. So it's something worth looking into, because again, as we mentioned, no resource, if you're looking for jobs, no resource should be left alone, right? You always want to try to hit everything. So that's kind of the stateside version of it.
Yeah, in Ontario, we have that as well, and I know that most provinces have that as well. That if you need certain types of tech or accessibility, in Ontario, for example, they have the workplace. I think it's called the Workplace for People with Disabilities Act, And what it is it's pretty much saying that the employer has to have the accessibility for, or creates the accessibility for you.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, when you first start a job and you're still in your probationary period, a lot of the time, especially like if you're low vision and you need a magnifier, it's not going to be in the company's interest to spend $3,000 on a
Yeah.
magnifier for you.
Yeah.
So that's where some of these other programs will kind of kick in and say, okay, we'll help the employer get a certain amount, or what we'll do is we'll give you one, or we'll give you the ability to borrow one until your probation is up, or your 3-month probationary period or more, and then you can utilize that technical equipment. And if you work for the government or some of the bigger corporations, it's not an issue. It's just that when you're starting to deal with some of the smaller companies, $3,000, even $2,000 for someone to really, as a gamble, can really add up to them, and it really
Yeah.
scares them. So absolutely don't leave any rock unturned. If there's a program out there, absolutely utilize it, because it's there for a reason. And it's not that you should feel bad about using it, because it was put into place due to helping you try to find and um, keep employment. So absolutely
Exactly.
utilize it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lauren. And I think I particularly understand the small company side of it. I'm interning this summer with a smaller company, and there are some technology that I need. But even for a summer internship and to spend $500-600 in addition to other supporting costs, this seems a lot. And let alone like 3 or 4 thousand if you need a magnifier, right? And so instead of just saying, well, I guess I'm just going to have to make do without those resources, uh, you can always look at these types of sites and programs, because they will have opportunities. And I think one of the things that you also have to be aware of as a blind person is that if you are doing something like a summer internship, for example, you need to be able to make sure that you're going to plan for that internship in I don't know, let's say you get it in March, you have to start planning, right? Because if you do call DVR or whatever, they are going to take 6-10 weeks to get just everything in process, right? To process your paperwork, to look at your cases. They're not going to do it like you call them today and they're going to do it tomorrow. So unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, you do have to plan ahead, and you do have to keep yourself organized, because in the end, if you notice 2 weeks into the job, like I did, fortunately I was able to get a workaround, but if you do notice 2 weeks into the job, by the time you get what you need, it might be way too late. And especially if it's a summer internship type opportunity, you really don't want to miss out on that because of poor planning. So definitely plan ahead. And even if it is a longer term job, you want to be able to come in on day one and be able to work just like any other employee. And if that means you need to plan and talk to the right people to get the right technology, then you have to do that. So always, once you do get a job, that is a very crucial part, because like Lauren said, you have a probationary period. And if you can't perform in that probationary period because you didn't have the technology, then that's also not good. Um, I don't know, Lauren, what is your experience with planning for things like that? Like, I know you and I have talked about it. I didn't do such a good job of planning for that. But, have you had a similar experience, or did you kind of just pick it up without the same pain, I guess?
So at the very beginning, I did not plan whatsoever, and it kind
Yeah.
of got I kind of got burnt at the end, because it really wasn't something that I could just kind of walk into and say, okay, I can start doing my job well, because no, I needed the specialized equipment. And trying to tell your employer, well, I could work better if this is done, but it's going to take me 6 weeks. Well, they're not going to really want you on payroll for 6 weeks if you can't
Right.
perform up to everybody else. So one thing that I have learned is that to make sure that I get all that stuff in a row. And then when I'm actually talking to the employer, I'll contact them 4 weeks or 6 weeks beforehand. And depending on what type of position it is, I'll just explain to them, hey, listen, I really want to work for you. I can't work, like, I'm technically able to work, in 2 weeks or whatever. But for me to get the equipment, it's going to take me 6 weeks. It's going to take me 10 weeks due to this program. And I'd really like to be able to work with you, but can I start then? And if that's the case, can I get my offer from you now so I can do that? And what that also shows the employer is that you are very organized, and you're actually a forward thinker, as in,
Yep.
I want to make sure that I plan everything. And a lot of the time, they're more than willing to accommodate you, or say, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll get you into orientation say in 3 weeks, so that because it'll take you 2 weeks or whatever, and then you'll have all the equipment. Or even sometimes they'll surprise you and say, you know what, is there a place to rent it? Well, possibly, I can go this. Okay, what we'll do is we'll rent it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month for you, no problems, while you're getting into this program. But as long as you show us that that you've applied for this program, we're okay with that.
Yep.
And so you never really know what the employer is willing to do for you until you ask them. And
Yes.
you're going to get two different types of employers. You're going to get the employers to kind of weirded out and say, well, this sounds too difficult. And it's like, well, just let me know. Or you can also have the employer that goes, oh my God, you're so organized. You're such a great guy or person. I absolutely want to hire you. And that gives you brownie points right off the bat.
Yeah. One of the things I want to mention here when it comes to accessibility and working with employers is that for a lot of people, we have this image that accessibility costs a lot of money and the employer is going to spend thousands and thousands of dollars just for you, and they might need to spend $5,000 or $6,000 on a braille note per se, right? Those are very expensive. But in reality, I learned this when I was recruiting for a large bank. They spend on average $500 per employee who is disabled to accommodate them, right? Because yes, there's people like ourselves who need large cost equipment, but then there are also people who really don't need any type of accommodation, or they need something that is relatively cheap. So never really feel bad about saying like, oh, is it going to be wrong for me to ask for a braille note or whatever? Because a lot of firms, especially once you've gotten hired, they're hiring you not because you're a charity case, right? They're hiring you because you're actually going to perform and they expect you to. So if they did hire you for that reason, then they're going to want to help you. And B, when you average out the cost with the other employees, it really isn't going to cost them very much more, and they're going to get that much more value from what you bring to the company. So, I think that that's the best thing that I've learned, because for me, it was always more tentative and said like, oh, I'm going to be a burden on the company. And that's really not true at all. And so, you can be comforted by the statistic that it only really costs about $500 to accommodate a person with a disability. And so, yeah, go on, Lorne.
No, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to pivot now, talking a little bit. I feel like we've kind of been jumping around a little bit, but talking a little bit more about dressing for success. Now, I know as a blind person, for me, I never really, dressing for success is a very foreign concept, because to me, it doesn't really make a difference, right? If I'm wearing a polo shirt like I am now, or a t-shirt, or a dress shirt with a tie. And I know a lot of other blind people have felt this way as well. But it is a really, really important part, especially, even today with the Zoom calls, that you need to be able to make sure that everything looks appropriate. And that involves your clothing, that involves your lighting, all these things, because it really does make a big impression on the employee that you took the time, or the employer, that you took the time to actually look at these little details and put on a shirt and tie, even though you're doing a Zoom interview. And of course, if you're doing a real interview, then you definitely want to go get your suit on. But it really makes a big difference. And I think that there are a lot of programs. If you live alone, for example, and you're thinking like, well, I'm totally blind, how am I going to pick out a suit, or how am I going to do all this? Oftentimes you go to these stores. I went to the store myself, Suit Supply, I believe it was. And I bought a suit. Everything was, they guided me through the whole process, very friendly staff, very good staff. And, read the reviews on Google, make sure that they do have friendly staff, and then go down and tell them what you need and what your budget is, and they'll work with you. And in addition, when it comes to checking, you can ask a family member, a neighbor, a friend. There are also other services out there that you can ask to make sure that you do look right, because it really does make a big difference. And I know that when we're totally blind, we can totally forget about it, because to us, it doesn't really make a difference if we're dressed nicely or not, or if the lights are on or off. I know that I've had my fair share of days where the lights are on for like 3 or 4 days straight, just because I didn't know that they were on. So, you definitely want to be conscious of those types of things, and also be conscious of, especially during Zoom calls now, if you have a huge mess on the couch behind you, maybe take care of that before your interview, because that does show the employer the type of person you are. And, they might not be so happy about you having a big mess, because they're like, I wonder what they are like, what they're going to be like if I hire them. Yeah, have you done any Zoom interviews, Lauren? Can you give any more tips? I think that's pretty much what I have from the Zoom interviews I've done.
No, I haven't per se done any Zoom interviews. I find that a lot of, especially around here, it's very much Skype, but very, very similar thing. The nice thing though is right now, especially with how everything is, you only have to spend 50% on your suit because
You
realistically
just
you
need
could
the
just be in
top.
it.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So it doesn't matter about bottoms. It's just all about, get yourself a nice blazer and a nice button up shirt or whatever, and away you
A
go.
blazer. Just get a suit jacket. Don't get a blazer.
Well, a blazer, is kind of, it's business cash. So you don't want to go too much because you're not going to wear a tux with a cummerbund and a little bow tie or something.
It
So,
does also depend on what you're applying for, right? If you're applying for a company that has a more, casual wardrobe, then maybe showing up in a suit would be a little bit much. But if you're applying, like I'm doing a lot of banking recruiting, right? And so if I were to show up in a blazer, they would not like it.
yeah, but
So,
then you get someone like marketing for me and it's like, oh, what are you wearing? The more flashy things that you can wear, it's like,
yeah,
wait, why are you wearing that? It's like, well, because I think outside of the box. Oh, great.
yeah.
So,
So it does also pay to do a little bit of research, do some Googling, and ask other people maybe that if you know them who work in the industry. Because I think, like I said, if you show up in a suit to like an interview for a tech company, it might be a lot different than if you show up in, a t-shirt to a bank. They might not like that. So
oh,
it really
absolutely.
makes
Yeah.
a big difference on the wardrobe and what everyone else is wearing. And especially if you're blind, it's really hard because you can't just, look online or something and say like, typical banker outfits, and they're going to show a bunch of pictures, right? But there are still sites on Google that'll give you some verbal guidance, so definitely take a look at those. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much what I had about success and dressing for success. I think it's.
So
I
just to
want to.
kind of touch on that real quick, sorry. One of the easiest ways, if you have, like, for example, data on your phone, but you don't have a paid plan with some of the other kind of, I guess, apps out there or other people, there's a program called Be My Eyes. And it's really interesting because they're all volunteers. And it's really interesting because you can stand in front of a mirror, hit that up there, point it up there and say, on a scale of 1 to 10, how classy do I look? Or, is everything good? And then you're going to start getting all these people from around the world and they're going to go like, yeah, it's great. So if you do even 3 or 4 of those, you're going to hit 3 or 4 different people. And these
Mhm.
volunteers are so excited just to, help blind people that they're really going to say, oh, well, this is great. Or I wouldn't really go with that. But at least if you have 4 or 5 different types of opinions, you're not just getting it from one person. And of course, the salesperson is going to love you in the most expensive stuff. And it's like, well, how good is that employee's fashion? You don't
Yeah.
know necessarily. So if you can kind of hit 5 or 6 different people's opinions, then that can really benefit you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lauren. I forgot completely about Be My Eyes, but you can definitely use that for checking wardrobes and definitely getting a diverse array of opinions. And that'll really help you make sure that you do look right and that your hair is cut. Well, one thing I want to touch on a little bit, because this is one thing that I neglected a lot was, or at least one of my friends and I really both neglected this, and his sister pointed it out, is you want to make sure that you're clean shaven and that your hair isn't like a mess. I know for a while I had my pandemic cut, and it wasn't a haircut, it was just hair, so it was ridiculous. And if you do have that, maybe wear a baseball cap. Be conscious of that, because that does kind of reflect on you as well, and make sure that you're clean shaven and that you at least look good, and definitely in an interview that you're wearing, maybe a scent is a little bit too much, especially with some scents. You don't want to be like, oh wow, definitely Carlos is here to interview, he just walked in the door, I can smell his cologne already.
Well, because especially over Zoom, they're not going to go, is that Ralph Lauren?
Yeah.
So,
like, wow, it gives
yeah,
you
so
sense
pretty
now
much
too.
Carlos is telling you do everything opposite of what I'm doing. I literally have a baseball cap because unfortunately in like where he lives, it's open to do that for haircuts. Here it isn't. And frankly, I've just been so lazy, especially with the whole pandemic and a newborn, well, 5 months old. It's just letting the beard grow, and it almost looks like one of those hockey beards.
Yeah, and again, all of this really comes down to from my experiences recruiting with bankers, right? And that might not necessarily apply to you, but I think that you definitely won't lose points for taking any of these tips out. But definitely
Exactly.
do some research beforehand, because, like I said, a lot of my experience is banking, and that might not necessarily go well with if you're applying for other jobs. So I think if you're taking anything away from this, it's definitely to do your research. beforehand.
Appearance is everything. Appearance is
Yes,
everything. That'll get you at least somewhat a consideration into the door, and then the skill set that you have can do the rest.
exactly. All right, so we talked about interview tips, or have we talked about interview tips? Oh yes. So here's another thing that I like to do: mock interviews. Mock interviews. I know we talked a little bit about workshops, and sometimes there are mock interview workshops, but there are also, realistically, you can do a mock interview with anyone, right? I mean, I was doing an interview for a trading position, and I worked with Lorne. I literally just gave him a few questions that he asked me, and of course, he did some of the more technical stuff we could work through, but he could at least say, "Hey, this sounds like you know what you're talking about," or like, "Dude, you're stuttering. This is so obviously you're just boring people." So even if you have a friend, if you're applying for like a marketing position and they might ask you about CRM or something like that, that someone not in marketing might not have an idea about, they can still at least help prepare you and make sure that you sound appropriate and that you're giving the right answers to the questions. And that you sound like you know what you're talking about, because realistically in a lot of these jobs, that's the most important part, right? You just want to make sure that you sound like you know what you're talking about and people will think that you do. So
And don't BS your way through, especially when you're talking to subject matter experts or people that are really entrenched in the area. Now, if
that
they're
is
in
true.
HR, they may not so much know some of the technicals, so you may be able to get away with it. But if you're dealing with someone that's actually doing that role, don't BS, because 9 times out of 10, they are more willing to accept a, you know what, I'm not sure, but I'd love to
Yeah.
learn, or else if there's a secondary interview, go, you know what, I'm really sorry, I'm actually not sure about that, but if you do give me the ability to have a second interview, I will gladly make sure that I research that and go forward with that.
Yeah, I think what I mean by like, sound like you know what you're talking about is more about like what I call the behaviorals. So like, those
Yeah.
questions like, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Tell me about a time that you failed. Those types of things. Obviously, I really agree with you, Lauren, on that. You don't want to BS your way through technical parts because they won't hire you, right? They don't want you to make a mistake on their dime. They want you to admit that, hey, I don't know how to do this. And then they'll be able to help you out and actually take you in the right direction. But I think when it comes to the behaviorals, I think it's more about your confidence, right? Because they're not going to go and say, make sure that Lauren really did fail when he started his own business at 16, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, but definitely technicals, I don't think you should take that approach to. You should definitely admit and be a little bit more humble there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we went through interview prep. We went through searching for jobs. We went through tips for dressing for success. I think that really covers a lot of the wide gamut. And again, I think it goes without saying, you need to be resilient during these times, right? It's very, very difficult to get a job, even if you're not blind. And I know that those rejection emails are not good. I got my rejection call, and it wasn't a pleasant experience, but it was really good because they gave me feedback, and I was able to improve. So hopefully for the next interview, I can do better in other places. So it's just really important to learn, and a mistake is always an opportunity. And if you just get upset about it and say, well, this is terrible, then you can you won't learn. But if you decide to say, okay, what did I do wrong, then you'll learn, and it'll be hopefully you'll get a better result next time.
Yeah, we're almost out of time now, so I think we should definitely do elevator pitches as well as other type of interview tips with another one, because we've had such a good information already, and we've had a lot of it, that it's probably better to break them up into two different, I guess, podcasts to really kind of focus a little bit more and kind of dial in directly exactly what to do and what not to do.
Exactly.
But if you do want to get in touch with us, please absolutely reach out. You can email us at blindbanter, BlindBanter @gmail.com. We're at BlindBanter on Twitter, BlindBanter through Facebook, and at The Real Blind Banter on Instagram. So I want to thank you for watching the podcast or listening to the podcast, and we hope that you join us for the next one. Until next time, stay safe.